The cafeteria's cheerful hum shattered into screams. 16-year-old Tomas Cruz, mid-laugh, clutched his chest, eyes wide with terror, before crumpling to the linoleum floor. His father, Mateo, a war veteran whose face usually held the stoic lines of countless battles, let out a choked cry, dropping to his knees. "Tomas! My son!" Chaos erupted. Nurses rushed, but it was Dr. Alaric Kael, the formidable head of cardiac ICU, who took command. "Clear the area. Get him to trauma." Kael moved with the practiced, confident efficiency of a surgeon who rarely knew defeat. But even as the trauma team swarmed, pumping and shocking, the monitor's defiant flatline mocked their every effort. Mateo watched, a silent plea etched onto his face as his son's young life slipped away. In the periphery, almost invisible amidst the controlled panic, stood Elara Safi, a rookie nurse. Her heart pounded, a silent agony for Mateo, for Tomas. She saw the despair, the frantic movements, the textbook protocols unfolding perfectly yet fruitlessly. And in the midst of it all, her gaze fixed on a subtle detail missed by the seasoned experts. No one noticed Elara, no one asked her opinion. Not yet. But a quiet certainty bloomed in her chest. They were missing something vital. The stark, fluorescent brilliance of Olympus Memorial's state-of-the-art trauma bay did little to soften the horrifying tableau. Despite the precision-engineered equipment and the practiced efficiency of its elite staff, a raw, primal panic simmered beneath the surface. Dr. Alaric Kael, renowned head of cardiac ICU, moved like a perfectly calibrated machine. His hands, usually reserved for delicate bypasses and intricate valve repairs, now drove relentless compressions into Tomas's young chest, a rhythmic testament to his unwavering will. Beside him, Dr. Sanaa Idris, a senior fellow whose sharp intellect and even sharper ambition had propelled her rapidly through the ranks, managed the airway, her movements swift and precise. "Epinephrine. 1 milligram." Kael barked, his voice betraying no fatigue, only an edge of growing frustration. He was a man accustomed to success, to the triumph of his intellect over medical enigma. Yet, for Tomas, the sophisticated choreography of modern medicine was failing. The monitor, a grim arbiter, continued its defiant, undulating flatline, a mocking scribble of absolute nothingness where a heartbeat should have been. Every shock, every medication, every perfectly executed protocol bounced off Tomas's young body like waves against a rock. Mateo Cruz, the war veteran, remained frozen, a statue carved from agony. His uniform, usually a symbol of his strength and resolve, now seemed to hang heavily on his slumped frame. He watched the relentless, futile dance around his son, his breath catching in ragged gasps. Each minute felt like an hour, each silent beat of the clock a hammer blow against his dwindling hope. He'd faced mortar fire and seen the horrors of combat, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the soul-crushing helplessness of watching his only child slip away in the sterile, unyielding grip of a world-class hospital. His silent pleas, usually prayers for strength and survival, now pleaded for a miracle he no longer dared to believe in. In the controlled chaos, Elara Safi remained a ghost. Her designation as a rookie nurse made her almost invisible to the attending physicians, yet her gaze was anything but unfocused. Her heart ached for Mateo, for Tomas, for the suffocating despair that was steadily filling the room. Her eyes, however, weren't fixed on the flatline, but on a subtle asymmetry around Tomas's collarbone, a faint, almost imperceptible discoloration that seemed to hum with an unaddressed narrative. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the standard protocols, as brilliant and flawlessly executed as they were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. Her mind, honed in far less forgiving environments, raced through possibilities that wouldn't appear in any Olympus Memorial textbook. She took a tentative step forward, her voice a quiet murmur against the clinical symphony. "Dr. Kael, the blunt force trauma, perhaps an undiagnosed pneumothorax, or a tension pneumothorax even. There's a subtle crepitation near the clavicle." Kael didn't even turn his head. His focus was absolute, his brilliant mind locked onto the intricate pathways of established cardiac arrest management. Dr. Idris, however, shot Elara a swift, disapproving glance. "Nurse Safi, we've had chest x-rays. No pneumothorax." And the trauma assessment was thorough. "We're dealing with traumatic cardiac arrest, not a collapsed lung." Her tone was polite, but firm, carrying the weight of institutional authority. It was a gentle but unmistakable dismissal, a clear reminder of Elara's place in the rigid hierarchy. Rookies observed, they didn't diagnose or speculate. Especially not when the head of cardiac ICU was leading the charge. Elara's cheeks flushed, but the conviction in her gut wouldn't be silenced. She retreated slightly, her eyes still scanning Tomas, the subtle details nagging at her. The monitor continued its unwavering flatline. The air thickened with a desperate urgency. Kael's brow furrowed, a hairline crack in his confident facade appearing as he called for another round of adrenaline. The team pressed on, sweat beading on their brows, their movements growing heavier, slower. The grim truth was beginning to settle over them like a shroud. Time was not merely running out, it was almost gone. Elara could feel it, an icy tendril of despair curling around her own heart. The subtle crepitation, the faint asymmetry, pulsed in her vision like a silent, screaming alarm. The rhythmic compressions continued, a brutal, desperate dance. But the monitors remained stubbornly unchanged, a stark, digital tombstone to Tomas's fading life. Dr. Kael, usually a monolith of composure, was starting to fray. His commands, once sharp and confident, now carried a strained edge, a hint of desperation seeping into their precision. Dr. Idris, her face slick with sweat, glanced at the clock, then at Kael, a silent acknowledgement of their grim prognosis passing between them. The air in the trauma bay grew thick with the smell of antiseptic and the heavier, metallic tang of futility. Mateo Cruz stood transfixed, a silent sentinel of suffering. Each tick of the clock was a hammer blow against the fragile shell of his hope. His gaze, raw and pleading, flickered between his son's lifeless form and the medical team struggling above him. He didn't understand the jargon, the drugs, the intricate dance of resuscitation, but he understood the tightening lines around Kael's eyes, the growing slowness in the nurse's movements. He understood that they were losing his son. Elara's own heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. The subtle crepitation, the faint but undeniable asymmetry in Tomas's chest, screamed at her. It wasn't just blunt force trauma, it was a specific kind, one that conventional protocols were designed to address, yet were somehow missing. Their efforts, while technically perfect, were being misdirected, a torrent of water aimed at the wrong inferno. She saw the team meticulously following every step, every guideline, but the fundamental why was eluding them. It was a fatal flaw in an otherwise flawless execution. "Dr. Kael," Elara began, her voice barely a whisper, yet imbued with an urgent tremor she couldn't suppress. "The percussion, it sounds off. And the mediastinum feels." Kael cut her off, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. "Nurse Safi, we appreciate your observation, but we're following standard procedure. We've been over this." His tone was low, strained, but left no room for argument. He didn't have the luxury of entertaining rookie theories. Not now. Not when a life hung by a thread, and his own considerable expertise was failing. "Idris, too," shot Elara a look that said, "Read the room, rookie." Elara fell silent, but her mind raced. She knew. Her gut, trained in the chaos of battlefields where resources were scarce and unorthodox meant survival, screamed at her. She saw the minute details that her high-tech hospital training hadn't emphasized, but her past had burned into her memory. The protocols were designed for a general case, but Tomas was not general. He was specific. And they were missing it. They were losing him. The beeping of the cardiac monitor, a relentless metronome of dying hope, suddenly stuttered. A single, prolonged R sliced through the tense silence, a sound that ripped through Mateo's soul like a physical wound. The line on the screen flattened, a cruel, unwavering horizontal streak. Tomas Cruz had flatlined. A collective gasp, soft yet devastating, escaped the lips of the medical team. The compressions halted. The frantic energy in the room evaporated, replaced by a suffocating stillness. Dr. Kael stared at the monitor, his shoulders slumping, defeat etched deeply into his features. He had fought, He had given his all, but it wasn't enough. The brilliant head of cardiac ICU had failed. Mateo let out a choked sound, a guttural sob that he instantly swallowed, burying his face in his hands. His broad shoulders shook, the silent scream of a father losing his son. The raw anguish was palpable, a heavy weight pressing down on every soul in the room. Kael cleared his throat, his voice thick with resignation, the words a death knell. Time of death. 21:47. But just as the words hung in the air, cold and definitive, another voice, quiet yet unnervingly firm, pierced through the despair. It was Elara's. No, she said, her voice trembling slightly, but carrying an undeniable steel. Not yet. Dr. Kael, wait. There's something you're overlooking. She stepped forward, her gaze locked on the monitor, then on Tomas's chest, a burning conviction in her eyes that defied the grim reality displayed before them. Her quiet challenge, against Kael's authority, against the unyielding logic of a flatline, felt like a thunderclap in the suddenly silent room. This is where Elara steps up, an underdog about to prove everyone wrong. Haven't we all felt overlooked at some point, knowing we had more to offer? If that resonates with you, and you're cheering for Elara to get her chance, then we invite you to become a part of our growing global community. Hit that subscribe button. Your support truly helps us bring more incredible stories of hidden heroes and unexpected triumphs to life, making our shared journey even better. Join us. Dr. Kael's gaze snapped to Elara, cold and sharp enough to draw blood. Nurse Safi, this is a cardiac ICU. We have exhausted every protocol. The boy is gone. Your observation is noted, but frankly, it's irrelevant now. His voice was laced with the weary authority of a man who had faced death too many times. But Elara didn't flinch. The fear that had been a constant companion in her gut for the last hour now coalesced, not into panic, but into a steely resolve. It was the same fear that had fueled her in makeshift clinics under fire, the same cold dread that preceded an impossible decision. It was a fear she knew how to use. With respect, Dr. Kael, she countered, her voice now steady, imbued with an unfamiliar gravitas, it is far from irrelevant. The blunt force trauma, the way his body impacted the guardrail, it's not just about the heart stopping. There's a pressure here, a specific kind of internal compression that standard CPR won't clear. It's an oversight in an otherwise perfect execution of protocol because it's not what we expect to see here, in a sterile environment with all our advanced diagnostics. But I've seen it before. In the field, where resources are scarce and every second counts, we look for different signs. Her eyes flickered to Mateo, then back to Kael. It's about air, doctor. Trapped air, and it's crushing his heart. Mateo, who had been huddled in his despair, snapped his head up. His eyes, swollen and bloodshot, fixed on Elara, a tiny, desperate flicker of hope igniting within them. Air? What does she mean, Dr. Kael? His voice was hoarse, raw. Kael hesitated, his brow furrowed. He was listening, despite himself, to the unusual certainty in the quiet nurse's voice, to the unusual detail she offered. But protocol, hierarchy, and a lifetime of rigid adherence to established procedures fought against it. Mateo, she's a rookie nurse. This is highly unorthodox. Unorthodox means it hasn't been tried. Mateo's voice cracked, rising in volume, suddenly finding strength he didn't know he possessed. He lurched forward, placing himself between Kael and Tomas, his eyes pleading, desperate. Dr. Kael, you said you tried everything. Everything. But she's saying there's something else. Please. My son, he's all I have. Just give her a chance. 1 minute. Just one damn minute. The war veteran's anguish filled the room, a silent plea that resonated with everyone. Dr. Kael looked from Mateo's tear-streaked face to Elara's unwavering gaze. The tension in the room was electric, the air thick with unspoken desperation. He prided himself on logic, on empirical data, and Elara's suggestion, coming from a rookie nurse, defied all of it. Yet, the conviction in her voice, the spark of insight, and Mateo's raw plea chipped away at his rigid resolve. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of a dying boy, a grieving father, and his own scientific integrity pressing down on him. 1 minute, Kael finally conceded, the words barely a whisper, an admission of defeat and a desperate gamble. "You have exactly 60 seconds, Nurse Safi. Anything beyond that, and we stand down." It was Elara's turning point. The permission, however reluctant, was all she needed. In that instant, the shy, unnoticed rookie nurse vanished, replaced by a focused, determined medic. Her posture straightened, her shoulders, which usually carried the weight of her humility, now held a quiet, formidable strength. Her hands, which usually performed mundane tasks with efficiency, now seemed to thrum with a palpable readiness. She moved towards Tomas's gurney, her movements fluid and purposeful, contrasting sharply with the frozen awe of the other medical staff. She didn't ask for instruments, didn't hesitate. She knew exactly what she needed, and her eyes scanned the room, instantly identifying a large bore needle usually reserved for 4-access or fluid aspiration. "Dr. Kael," she began, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the stunned silence. The initial blunt force impact likely caused a tension pneumothorax. Air entered the pleural space and became trapped, building immense pressure, collapsing the lung, and pushing on the mediastinum, effectively preventing the heart from pumping, even with resuscitation. Standard CPR, ventilation, defibrillation, none of it addresses the underlying pressure. It's like trying to restart an engine that's been crushed. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces in the room, Kael, still skeptical but now listening intently, Idris, wide-eyed with a mix of shock and dawning comprehension, Mateo, clinging to every word as if they were his last breath. In the field, when you have nothing else, and a patient's chest is tight, unyielding to ventilation, and their heart won't start after trauma, you don't wait for x-rays. You don't wait for advanced diagnostics. You feel the problem, and you relieve the pressure. It's a fundamental principle of combat casualty care, fix the fixable now. We need to decompress that chest, Dr. Kael, or he won't have a chance. Her explanation was simple, direct, devoid of jargon. It wasn't about complex cardiac physiology, it was about basic physics and immediate survival, stripped down to its brutal essentials. Her transformation was complete. The fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by an unwavering certainty, a potent blend of courage and raw, unadulterated medical instinct. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a medic, with a plan, and a boy's life hanging in the balance. A profound stillness descended upon the room, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of alarms and urgent commands. All eyes, now riveted, watched Elara. She moved not with haste, but with a quiet, devastating certainty. The chaotic energy that had permeated the resuscitation bay seemed to coalesce and narrow, focusing entirely on her. She reached for the instrument tray, bypassing the array of advanced cardiac tools. A large-bore angiocath, she requested, her voice steady, and an alcohol swab. Her tone was less a request, more a clear directive. Dr. Kael, still reeling from the unexpected surrender of his authority, watched, his face a complex mosaic of skepticism and grudging curiosity. He wanted to object, to assert the decades of rigorous training that screened against this unconventional approach. But Elara's conviction, and Mateo's desperate, pleading eyes, had silenced him. He saw the equipment Elara chose, simple, almost primitive, in comparison to the elaborate machinery surrounding them, and a tremor of apprehension snaked through him. This wasn't advanced medicine, this was frontier medicine, stark and brutal. Dr. Idris, meanwhile, stood utterly frozen. Her sharp, ambitious mind, accustomed to dissecting complex medical puzzles with elegant precision, was baffled. A rookie nurse, challenging Kael, then choosing that? Her initial dismissal was slowly giving way to a nascent, unsettling awe. There was an almost primal grace in Elara's movements, a stark competence that transcended job titles and hierarchies. Elara took the requested angiocath from the assisting nurse, her fingers brushing the plastic, feeling its heft. She swabbed Tomas's chest with a swift, economical motion, the sterile scent cutting through the metallic tang of fear in the air. Her eyes, usually soft and unassuming, were now sharp, unblinking, mapping an internal topography only she could see. She leaned over Tomas's inert form, her gaze fixed on a specific point on his chest. It was a spot inches from where Kael had painstakingly worked, yet it might as well have been a world away. Mateo, slumped against the wall, felt his entire universe constrict to the fragile point Elara now focused on. His breath hitched in his throat, a silent scream of hope and terror. He saw the subtle tremor in Elara's hand as she held the needle, but it wasn't fear, it was the focused tension of an archer drawing a bow. His son's life, which had felt utterly beyond his reach moments ago, was now inexplicably tied to the quiet nurse's steady hand. He found himself praying, a desperate, guttural plea he hadn't uttered since the darkest days of the war. The air grew heavy, almost palpable with unspoken questions and suspended judgment. Every doctor, every nurse in the room, found their own skepticism battling with an unacknowledged thrill, a forbidden curiosity. They had witnessed Elara challenge the Titans, now they would witness her execution. Elara's breath was even, her movements fluid. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. Her fingers splayed over Tomas's ribs, locating, assessing. Then, with a practiced, deliberate push, the needle entered the skin. It was an invasive act, yet under Elara's touch, it seemed almost gentle, precise. A ripple of suppressed gasps went through the room. Kael flinched, a low growl of protest catching in his throat, but it died unspoken. Idris's eyes widened, a dawning realization etching itself onto her features. She recognized the technique now, a distant memory from obscure trauma journals, a maneuver almost never seen outside of pre-hospital combat zones. It was brutal, effective, and utterly desperate. Elara held the needle steady, her head cocked, listening, feeling, a nearly imperceptible tilt of her wrist. There was no grand flourish, no dramatic pause, just the quiet, focused intensity of a craftsperson at work. The only sound was the incessant, flatlining beep of the monitor, a harsh metronome counting down the seconds of Tomas's life, a drumbeat for Elara's desperate gamble. Her brow furrowed, not in doubt, but in fierce concentration. She was not just performing a procedure, she was having a silent conversation with the body, coaxing, listening for a response that only she seemed to anticipate. The tension in the room coiled tighter, an unbearable knot of collective apprehension, fear, and a terrifying, fragile glimmer of hope. Elara's breath hitched, a silent, internal cue, as her fingers made their final, almost imperceptible adjustment. The needle, a slender extension of her will, moved with surgical precision, finding its mark, releasing the last, crucial blockage. There was no audible click, no dramatic signal, just the faint, squishing sound of fluid finding its correct path again. Her eyes, still locked on Tomas's still face, widened ever so slightly, a flicker of something akin to recognition, or perhaps, expectation, passing through them. Then, she withdrew the needle, slow and steady, leaving only a tiny, almost invisible puncture wound. The world held its breath. The flatlining shriek of the monitor continued, an unbearable testament to the silence that had swallowed the room. Every eye, every desperate plea, every unspoken prayer, was fixed on that green line, daring it to move. Dr. Kael stood frozen, his brilliant mind racing, trying to process what he'd just witnessed, unable to reconcile the audacity of the act with the expected, inevitable failure. Dr. Idris had pressed a hand to her mouth, her gaze darting between Elara's calm, unassuming face and Tomas's utterly motionless form. Mateo, rigid and pale, looked as though he might shatter into 1,000 pieces at any moment, his hope a fragile, thin thread about to snap. Then, a flicker. It was so subtle, so brief, that for a fraction of a second, everyone wondered if it was just their eyes playing tricks in the adrenaline-soaked haze. But then it came again, clearer this time. The flat line on the monitor wavered, a tiny, almost imperceptible blip. And another. And then, like a hesitant dawn after a long, dark night, a struggling, irregular waveform began to bloom across the screen. The incessant, agonizing beep was brutally, abruptly silenced, replaced by a new sound. Thump-thump, thump, thump-thump. Slow, uneven, but undeniably there. A heartbeat. A collective gasp ripped through the room. It was raw, involuntary, a wave of disbelief and dawning, fragile hope. Mateo's knees buckled. A quiet sob, thick with a lifetime of pain and an instant of unimaginable relief, tore from his throat as his eyes, blurred with tears, locked onto the monitor. His son's heart. Beating. Dr. Kael staggered back, one hand flying to his chest, as if to confirm his own heart was still working. His jaw hung slack, his brilliant, analytical mind momentarily unhinged by the impossible. Idris's hand dropped from her mouth, her eyes wide, shining with an awe that transcended professional rivalry, a genuine, profound shock that quickly morphed into something bordering on reverence. The other nurses and residents, who had been holding themselves stiffly, released their tension in a symphony of ragged sighs and whispered prayers. The air, which moments ago had felt thick and unbreathable with despair, now vibrated with a fragile, burgeoning sense of triumph. Elara, amidst the rising tide of emotion, simply took a quiet step back. She didn't look for praise, didn't acknowledge the stunned faces. Her gaze remained on Tomas, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest, the slow, rhythmic beat now growing steadier on the monitor. She was observing, confirming, ensuring the miracle was real, not just a fleeting echo. Her face, still composed, held a profound weariness, but also a deep, quiet satisfaction. The battle was won, for now. Mateo stumbled forward, reaching for Tomas's hand, his fingers trembling as he felt the faint warmth, the fragile pulse. He buried his face in his son's chest, not needing to hear the monitor, just needing to feel the life coursing through him. He was sobbing now, raw, guttural cries of a father reborn, a man pulled back from the precipice of utter devastation. The tears streamed down his face, washing away the anguish, the terror, leaving behind only the purest, most overwhelming gratitude. Kael found his voice, a husky whisper. He's in sinus rhythm. How? His question wasn't accusatory, but born of an intellectual curiosity that dwarfed his earlier dismissiveness. He approached the monitor, peering at the tracing with an intensity that belied his shock. The irregular beats were smoothing out, the rhythm gaining strength. Tomas was still incredibly fragile, far from out of the woods, but he was alive. He had a pulse. He had a heartbeat. He had a chance. Idris, still trembling slightly, looked at Elara, a complex mix of emotions playing across her features, envy, awe, and a dawning respect that would reshape her perspective forever. She saw not just a rookie nurse, but a force of nature, a quiet storm that had just defied every expectation, every established protocol, every expert opinion, and brought a life back from the brink. The room, once a chamber of impending death, was now pulsing with a different kind of energy, fragile, tentative, but undeniably alive. The silence that had preceded the miracle was gone, replaced by the hushed, reverent murmurs of a team coming to terms with the impossible. Elara Safi had not just saved a life, she had shattered a paradigm. And in doing so, she had pulled them all, especially Mateo Cruz, back from the very edge of an emotional abyss, bathing the tense, sterile room in the glorious, unbridled light of catharsis. The collective gasp that filled the room was not one of panic, but of pure, unadulterated shock and relief. It was a single, unified exhalation, a sonic wave of disbelief and awe. The rhythmic, strong thump-thump from the monitor, amplified and undeniable, was the sound of a universe righting itself, of hope reborn. Tomas Cruz, against every expectation, every grim prognosis, was alive. Dr. Kael stood frozen for a beat, his brilliant mind struggling to reconcile what he had just witnessed with everything he knew. The dismissive glare he'd cast at Elara moments before had vanished, replaced by an expression of profound, almost reverent bewilderment. His jaw, typically set in an authoritative line, was slack. He moved first, not to Tomas, but to Elara, his eyes, usually sharp and critical, now searching hers with an intensity she had never seen. "Nurse Safi," he began, his voice surprisingly soft, what just happened?" It wasn't a challenge, it was an honest plea for understanding from a man whose world had just been irrevocably shifted. Elara met his gaze, her own emerald eyes calm, despite the tremor of adrenaline still coursing through her. "A subxiphoid pericardial tamponade, Dr. Kael. The blunt force trauma caused internal bleeding, rapidly compressing his heart." The standard chest compressions and intubation couldn't relieve the pressure. He needed a pericardiocentesis. I used the shortest, most direct route to relieve the immediate pressure. She spoke clinically, but her voice held a quiet certainty that conveyed not just medical knowledge, but an intimate familiarity with life-or-death stakes. Kael processed her words, the precision of her diagnosis and execution hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He was the head of cardiac ICU, yet he had missed it. He, Dr. Alaric Kael, renowned for his diagnostic prowess, had been blind to a critical detail that a rookie nurse had spotted. A slow flush crept up his neck, but it wasn't shame, it was a dawning humility, a shattering of his own formidable ego. A pericardiocentesis, he repeated, the word tasting different on his tongue now, imbued with a new meaning. Without imaging. On the fly. With only that. He gestured vaguely at the slender needle she had used. His voice, now stronger, carried a note of deep respect. Nurse Safi, that was extraordinary. You saved his life. Dr. Idris, recovering from her initial stupor, approached, her usual poise fractured. I've never seen anything like it, she murmured, her voice laced with awe. The competitive edge that usually defined her was gone, replaced by genuine admiration. How did you even know to look for that? And to execute it with such precision, without proper equipment, in those conditions? She trailed off, shaking her head. The hierarchy, the titles, the years of training, for a moment, they all dissolved, leaving only the raw, undeniable reality of Elara's skill. But it was Mateo Cruz's reaction that truly transformed the room. He had stood silent, a sentinel of grief, his eyes fixed on his son, daring to hope. Now, he stumbled forward, his breath hitched. Tears, hot and heavy, streamed down his withered face, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming, uncontainable gratitude. He reached for Elara, his hand trembling as it clasped her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. My son, he choked out, the words thick with emotion. You brought him back. From the dead. I don't know how to thank you, Elara. His voice cracked, the raw vulnerability of a man given his son back from the precipice tearing through the sterile quiet. He wasn't addressing a nurse, he was addressing his son's savior, a miracle worker. Elara's eyes, usually guarded, softened. She placed her hand gently over his, offering comfort. We did it together, Mateo. Everyone played a part. She glanced at Kael and Idris, silently acknowledging their efforts, deflecting the intense spotlight from herself, true to her humble nature. Yet, the subtle firmness in her posture, the quiet confidence that hummed beneath her modesty, spoke volumes. She accepted the gratitude, not with self-aggrandizement, but with a deep, empathic understanding of Mateo's pain and sudden relief. Dr. Kael, watching her, seemed to finally put the pieces together. Nurse Safi, he said, a new glint in his eye, that wasn't just textbook. That was something learned in a crucible. Where did you train? Elara hesitated, then met his gaze. Her transformation wasn't about becoming someone new, but about her true self being revealed. I served, she said simply, her voice quiet. As a field medic, in austere environments. Resource scarce. Sometimes, titles don't matter, only results. And understanding the human body's resilience, and its breaking points. The revelation rippled through the room. A veteran field medic. The pieces clicked into place for everyone. Her calm under pressure, her unconventional approach, her uncanny precision, it all made sense. She wasn't just a rookie nurse, she was a seasoned warrior in the quiet war against death, tempered by experiences few in their pristine hospital could even imagine. Her humility wasn't a facade, it was the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the worst, performed the impossible, and knew that every life saved was a privilege, not a personal victory. The emotional validation for Elara wasn't just Kael's respect or Mateo's tears, it was the palpable shift in the atmosphere. The other nurses, the interns, the technicians, they looked at her differently. Not as the quiet rookie, but as Elara Safi, the one who saw what others missed, the one who held life in her hands and wouldn't let go. Her hidden expertise wasn't just acknowledged, it was understood, valued, and fundamentally recognized as a part of who she was, a compassionate, skilled healer forged in the unforgiving fires of necessity, now finally allowed to shine. The following days unfolded like a slow, tender bloom after a violent storm. Tomas Cruz, still fragile, was moved to the ICU, then to a regular ward. Mateo rarely left his side, a silent vigil that spoke volumes. The first time Tomas opened his eyes and recognized his father, a choked sob escaped Mateo, a sound more profound than any battle cry. Tomas's recovery was slow, but it was steady, a testament to the fragile thread of life Elara had so deftly snatched from the brink. His doctors, now a consortium of specialists including a humbled Kael and a quietly observant Idris, marveled at the speed of his neurological recovery, attributing it to the immediate and precise intervention. Hope, once a flickering ember, now burned bright in the Cruz family's eyes. For Dr. Alaric Kael, the experience was a seismic shift. The initial shock gave way to a profound, almost disorienting, humility. He was a brilliant man, but his brilliance had been encased in the impenetrable armor of protocol and hierarchy. Elara had not just saved a life, she had shattered his worldview. He found himself replaying the moments in the ER, seeing his own blind spots with painful clarity. He realized that his rigidity, while stemming from a desire for excellence, had nearly cost a young life. His conversations with Elara in the following days were not interrogations, but genuine inquiries. He sought to understand her perspective, her methods, the logic behind the unconventional. He didn't just acknowledge her skill, he became its fervent advocate. Kael's first action was to ensure Elara's official commendation was not merely a formality but a full, public recognition. He pushed for a review of the hospital's emergency protocols, not to abandon established methods, but to integrate a more flexible, intuitive approach to complex trauma, a concept he now championed as adaptive medicine. He initiated new training modules, personally overseeing sessions where Elara, initially hesitant, was coaxed into demonstrating her techniques and sharing her knowledge. This wasn't about Elara fitting into Kael's world, it was about Kael opening his world to Elara's unique expertise. The change in him was palpable. The stern, unyielding head of cardiac ICU now carried a contemplative air, his eyes holding a new, profound respect for the myriad ways life could be saved. He learned that true leadership wasn't just about giving orders, but about recognizing and empowering talent, regardless of where it stood in the pecking order. Dr. Sanaa Idris's transformation was more subtle, born not of intellectual epiphany but of quiet observation. She had always prided herself on her sharp intellect and rapid ascent through the ranks. Elara's intervention had rattled her, not just because it contradicted her training, but because it exposed a blind spot in her own ambition. She had chased status, Elara had chased life. In the quiet moments after Tomas's revival, Idris watched Elara's humble grace, her genuine relief, her complete lack of ego. It was a stark contrast to the competitive drive that often consumed the medical elite. Idris began to observe Elara more closely during their shifts, noticing the quiet attention she gave to every patient, the gentle way she spoke, the subtle details she always seemed to catch. She started asking Elara for informal advice on difficult cases, no longer viewing her as a rival, but as a source of invaluable insight. The experience began to soften Idris, shifting her focus from professional validation to genuine patient care, inspiring her to seek a more authentic purpose within her demanding career. Elara Safi, however, remained Elara. The revelation of her elite field medic past wasn't something she advertised, but nor did she hide it. It was simply a part of who she was, now integrated into her identity within Olympus Memorial. She didn't seek a promotion, a new title, or special treatment. Her authentic life was simply continuing to be the compassionate, skilled healer she always was, but now with the freedom to fully utilize her diverse skill set. She found herself increasingly sought out by doctors for consultations on unusual trauma cases, her insights often providing critical breakthroughs. She mentored junior nurses and interns, sharing not just medical knowledge but also the quiet strength and resourcefulness forged in the crucible of combat. The hospital itself began to change, too. The rigid hierarchy, while not entirely dissolved, was undeniably softened. There was a newfound appreciation for diverse experiences, for questioning assumptions, for looking beyond the obvious. Olympus Memorial, once a bastion of conventional excellence, was slowly evolving into a place that championed innovation and valued the quiet heroism found in every corner of its bustling corridors. Elara's transformation was complete, not in the sense that she became someone new, but that she was finally seen for who she truly was. She moved through the hospital with the same quiet grace, but now it was imbued with an undeniable authority, the authority of skill, integrity, and unwavering dedication. Her story became a whispered legend, a beacon of hope and a powerful reminder that true expertise isn't always found in grand titles or lofty positions, but often in the unassuming heart of those who, when faced with despair, dare to whisper, "Let me show you." It was a testament to the lasting power of human connection, the humility of true wisdom, and the boundless capacity for growth and healing, both within the human body and the human spirit. Elara's journey reminds us that true expertise and profound healing often emerge from unexpected places, championing humility and genuine skill over hierarchy. What quiet acts of heroism have inspired you in your own life? We invite you to join our global community and become a part of stories that celebrate resilience, connection, and the unwavering human spirit. Your subscription helps us bring more inspiring narratives like Elara's to life, allowing us to explore these powerful themes together. Thank you for watching, for sharing in Elara's triumph, and for being such a valued part of our growing family. Let's continue this journey of discovery.